Ever wondered what would make someone walk away from a life of luxury and power? Gautama, a privileged prince, did just that in search of something the world couldn't give him: enlightenment. His transformative journey didn't just break the norms of his time, but revealed universal truths that might change the way you see life. Ready to dive into what made him the Buddha? Buddha Purnami isn't just a date on the calendar. It marks a deep transformation. Picture a day when an ordinary human mind transcends itself and connects with a higher intelligence. On May 10th, Gautama, once a simple seeker, became the Buddha. This wasn't about gathering knowledge, but about breaking through the limits of the mind. Think about it. How often does our mind trick us, trapping us in old stories and fears? Gautama shattered those chains under the moonlight. The experience of enlightenment is rare and mysterious. Gautama sat under the Bodhi tree, and as the moon glowed, something incredible happened. He realized that true wisdom comes when we remove all internal barriers. He broke free from the mental patterns we all carry, making way for a pure state of being. Now, imagine being able to free yourself from the daily worries that steal your peace. That's what enlightenment means. A clarity that no amount of material pleasure can match. It's amazing how that moment still echoes today, shaping spiritual practices around the world. Gautama's enlightenment wasn't just some mystical event. It was proof that a human being can rise above their own nature. When you think about all the mind can achieve, building cities, solving complex problems, you realize that same mind can reach something far greater. It makes you wonder what living with a truly free mind would be like, something Gautama understood before stepping into the next chapter of his journey. Gautama was born as Siddhartha, a prince who had the world at his feet. His father surrounded him with wealth and luxury, thinking he could shape his son's destiny as a great emperor. To do this, he shielded him from suffering, pain, and the harsh realities of life. Can you imagine growing up without ever seeing something as simple as a dried leaf on the ground or someone struggling? It was like living in a bubble, surrounded by pleasures but empty of true purpose. A life of comfort, but missing something deeper. Everything changed when he turned 19. Siddhartha, restless and full of curiosity, finally went out to see the city streets. What he saw was shocking. Old age, sickness, and death, raw and real, right in front of his eyes for the first time. It was like a veil had been lifted from his sight. Isn't it wild to think that, until then, he hadn't known about the fragility of life? It made him question the true meaning of existence, which, until that point, had seemed like a parade of luxury without any real purpose. Imagine the dilemma of someone who always had everything, only to realize one day that having everything means nothing if it lacks purpose. That's what sparked the desire to search for deeper answers. Being a prince no longer felt satisfying. He needed something that made life meaningful. This was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey that wouldn't stop there. What he discovered on his quest went beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The first time Gautama saw the harsh reality of suffering, it hit him like a ton of bricks. Old age, sickness, and death were concepts that didn't exist in the sheltered world he knew. He saw an old man, hunched over and frail, and it was like time itself was mocking the idea of everlasting youth. Next, he came across a sick man, groaning in pain, showing just how fragile health really is. Finally, the sight of a lifeless body drove home the point that no one escapes the final destination. It was as if the ground beneath him had collapsed. These encounters forced him to think, what's the point of living a life full of fleeting pleasures if it all ends so mercilessly? He started questioning his very existence, realizing that everything his father had given him, wealth, power, security, was empty and meaningless in the face of life's universal suffering. If it were you, how would you cope with the realization that everything you once valued is just a house of cards? Gautama could no longer find comfort in worldly distractions. These thoughts ignited a deep unrest within him, a fire that couldn't be put out. The suffering he witnessed became a constant reminder that there had to be something more meaningful to discover. Just like how many of us seek purpose when life throws us into chaos, Gautama felt that life had to be about more than just getting by. Feeling this sense of emptiness, he knew what he had to do. He needed to go beyond his life of privilege and search for the real answers. The restlessness consumed Gautama, and he knew he couldn't stay in the palace any longer. Leaving behind his wife, his son, and the comfort of his home wasn't an easy choice, but he felt that seeking the truth was more important. Imagine walking away from everything you love for something that doesn't guarantee any immediate answers. Still, he left, knowing that enlightenment couldn't be reached while clinging to the illusions of a luxurious life. He wanted to grasp the true essence of existence, not just live in the blissful ignorance of comfort. Gautama's journey led him to explore the spiritual teachings of over 1,800 different schools of thought. He dove deep into various disciplines, trying to understand what many masters call samadhi, or the ultimate awareness of consciousness. Think about how many times you've searched for answers, going down one path after another, never giving up, even when the results seemed uncertain. Gautama's determination was nothing short of inspiring, even when every philosophy he studied fell short of giving him the complete enlightenment he craved. The search was a mix of fascination and frustration. Each practice offered glimpses of wisdom, but left him with even more questions. Imagine being so close to a breakthrough, but never quite reaching it. Yet, the desire to dig deeper kept pushing him forward. He knew he couldn't stop. The answer wasn't just in following what had already been taught, but in something that went beyond common logic. That's how he found himself at a point of extreme austerity, willing to do whatever it took to achieve enlightenment. Gautama joined the Samanas, giving up everything we think we need to survive. He believed that severe austerities could lead him to a higher state of clarity. He refused to eat, bringing himself to the brink of death. Think about the sheer willpower it takes not to give in to the basic instincts of survival, even when your body is begging for relief. Overcoming hunger and desire wasn't an ordinary feat. It was a battle that only a few would dare to face. The Samanas believed that enlightenment could be reached through suffering and denial. Gautama tested these limits, but even as his body weakened, enlightenment felt as far away as ever. It was like trying to cross a desert without knowing if the oasis was real or just a mirage. Think of the times you pushed yourself beyond what you thought you could handle, only to realize the path you were on wasn't right. It's a tough but necessary lesson. Not all extremes lead to answers. This phase, while not yielding the results he hoped for, was still crucial. He realized that the path to enlightenment wasn't about extremes, but something more balanced. Sometimes we look for answers in the hardest routines, thinking sacrifice is the key to success. But what if the answers lie somewhere else, away from the pain we think is essential? This realization led him to a new turning point, a place where he'd have the biggest epiphany of his life. On the brink of death by the river Niranjana, Gautama had a revelation that changed everything. He was so weakened from self-denial that he realized enlightenment wouldn't come from torturing or denying his body. The answer was within, not outside. It was like a light bulb moment. Maybe you've also looked for solutions in all the wrong places, only to realize what you needed was right within reach. Sometimes clarity hits when we're at our breaking point. The river Niranjana, with its calm waters, became the backdrop for this major turning point. Gautama realized that enlightenment was about breaking down internal barriers, not following strict external rules. It was like he'd been trying to open a door with the wrong key for years. Imagine the frustration, but also the relief of finally understanding what had been missing. This moment of insight reignited his spirit, like a fire had been lit within him. He knew he needed a fresh start, something that would take him beyond self-imposed suffering. Revitalized by this new understanding, Gautama made his way to the Bodhi tree. It was no longer a desperate search, but a journey focused on the simplicity of removing inner obstacles. What he learned by the Niranjana is something we can all take to heart. Instead of chasing success or happiness in complicated places, maybe the secret lies in looking inward. And so, Gautama's path led him to that place where the greatest transformation was about to unfold. Under the Bodhi tree, Gautama made a vow that most people wouldn't even dream of making. He promised he wouldn't get up until he understood the ultimate nature of existence, even if it took days or years. Just think about the strength of that commitment, giving himself over completely to something bigger than himself. That night, with the moon shining above, his determination brought an unimaginable level of clarity. Enlightenment didn't come gradually. It hit all at once, like a flash of total understanding, where every illusion dissolved like mist in the sunlight. This state of full awareness wasn't something you could easily put into words. Gautama realized that the mind, with all its limits, was like a veil hiding the truth. When that veil dropped, he saw the world as it truly was, interconnected and alive. Think about how many times we get wrapped up in our worries and dramas, not realizing that peace and clarity might be just one thought away. Gautama's enlightenment was a reminder that sometimes the hardest work is just letting go. The full moon bore witness to that historic moment, and Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one. That night under the tree wasn't just about him. It was about all of humanity. The simplicity of his experience was profound. He didn't need any supernatural power, just an understanding of his own mind. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If he could reach the level of clarity, what's stopping us from doing the same? And with that, the next chapter of the story was about to bring even more unexpected lessons. Right after reaching enlightenment, Gautama's first desire was something surprisingly simple: food. His disciples were puzzled, expecting words of wisdom or mystical rituals. But the greatness of his enlightened state lay in its simplicity. Imagine achieving what people consider the peak of human realization and still acknowledging basic human needs. That was Gautama's first lesson as the Buddha. Living an enlightened life doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, it's incredibly practical. Gautama's simplicity revealed a deep understanding. He didn't reject earthly life or simple pleasures. Instead, he embraced them in a new way, without attachment or excess. That's something we can all learn from, finding balance rather than chasing extremes. Whether it's eating well or striving for achievements, wisdom lies in not overcomplicating things. If you've ever found yourself stressed out about meeting others' expectations, remember the Buddha's first choice. Sometimes, the most profound thing is also the simplest. This down-to-earth, easygoing approach to enlightenment is a powerful reminder that spirituality isn't about escaping reality. It's about living fully in it without getting overwhelmed by worry. Imagine having a mind so clear that even the most basic meals become a joy. This simplicity changes how we look at our own lives and prepares us for the next big revelation, where even an astrologer would be shocked by Gautama's true greatness. One curious encounter happened early in Gautama's days as the Buddha. A famous astrologer known for predicting grand destinies crossed his path. He was stunned to see a calm monk when his predictions had said Gautama would become a great emperor. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone with such a glorious fate could choose a life of simplicity. It just goes to show that human expectations often miss the mark when it comes to understanding true greatness. The astrologer expected power, but what he found was wisdom. Gautama, now the Buddha, explained his philosophy with a calm simplicity that left the astrologer even more puzzled. He spoke about achieving greatness through inclusion, where the greatest leader isn't the one who rules over lands, but the one who transcends himself and connects with all living beings. That's a lesson for all of us. You don't need to control the world to feel a sense of purpose. Think about how often we chase power or status when the real mastery is found within ourselves, in the quiet space between our thoughts. The astrologer, still trying to wrap his mind around what he was hearing, was in awe. Gautama's understanding turned the idea of leadership into a universal responsibility. It wasn't about ruling anymore. It was about serving and including others. Just imagine the impact this way of thinking could have today, in a world that still puts so much emphasis on external achievements. The Buddha showed that true royalty belongs to those who break through their own limits and inspire others to do the same. And so, another chapter of his journey unfolded, leaving us with even more lessons to dive into. So, what will you do with this knowledge? Gautama's story shows us that real power lies in transcending our inner barriers and that enlightenment is within reach if we're brave enough to go after it. Are you willing to challenge your beliefs and step outside your comfort zone? What's stopping you from transforming your life like Gautama did? Think about that and start your journey today. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep learning how to apply these profound lessons to your own life.